Hey, what's up? So this movie, my goodness, if I was to give this out of 5, I would give this a 3 out of 5. Now, naturally, it would be a 2.5 out of 5, but with what they were able to deliver, I kinda enjoyed this. I was surprised because the trailers were not so promising. Actually, the trailers were terrible. The trailers are absolutely terrible. They don't give you a good idea of what this movie is. Plus, yes, the movie looks and feels cheap when you watch it because of this. I don't know, it's a colorist. It has a very cheap look, like something that was shot by someone or on an ordinary day with a normal camera. But generally, the story is really, 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 really good. And if you learn about the budget and what they were able to do with the budget, yeah, I thought it was decent. It punched above its weight. Yeah, so I'll give this a 3. Now, this is Hellboy, the Crooked Man. Hellboy, the Crooked Man is the 4th movie in the Hellboy franchise. I really loved the first 2 movies. The Guillermo del Toro movie, Ron Perlman as Hellboy. I love them because they were the definition of bringing imagination into life, especially the Golden Army. I loved that movie. I loved that movie because it was able to bring so many diverse creatures into life. And this is Guillermo del Toro, so there were all different kind of weird creatures popping up in that movie. And I thought that was pretty awesome because some of those things are just so imaginative. And so seeing them on screen was a blast. I didn't even care about Hellboy. I was just in for all these other things that he had created. And the story, the mythology, the world, you know, everything was just so interesting. And I loved that movie. The third one was absolute garbage. The first one was decent in introducing us to the world. And this 4th one now takes the 3, throws them away, and takes its own direction. The first 3 feel more comic bookish, colorful, playful. You know, they don't take themselves too seriously. They feel like Marvel productions. But now this now just takes a totally different direction. This is a much darker story. And the fact that they did not have a bigger budget meant that now they had to really, really concentrate on the story. They really had to concentrate on what was happening rather than the visual flair, because, you know, now you have to narrow it down to the story, because the story is all that you have because of, obviously, the budget. And so I thought they did a great job with this particular story. If you want to traumatize your kid, if you want to make your kid hate witches, if you want to just make your child become a very spiritual person, show them this movie. Yeah, this is a very dark spiritual, psychologically, this is a very dark psychological horror movie. There are a lot of spiritual element about it. I'm talking about witchcraft, I'm talking about, you know, collecting souls, things like that, you know, soul-based horror movie whereby it's dark. There are a lot of very uncomfortable imagery. You don't see that a lot in the trailers, but it feels much darker. It's even short. Some scenes are short to make it actually look like a horror movie, like a proper supernatural horror. It's supernatural horror, not necessarily gore, because you don't have a lot of gore, but it's in what they do with the supernatural elements that will stay with you. As I said, kids cannot watch this movie because they are never going to be the same again. I mean, there are some ideas, there are some things that are implied within the movie. There's a scene with a horse that once it's unveiled, first of all, you see the girl and you're like, yeah, that's kind of cool. That's a very good imagery. I don't want to spoil it for people, but there's something they do with a girl and a horse. It's not what you're thinking. Get your mind out of the gutter. So you see her come in, and then you learn about the horse, and then you go like, what the hell? And then they do a callback at the end. I thought those elements were insane. I mean, the witches, there's some things that they do with their bodies. You're like, what? That idea of this spiritual element, you know, there's an element of aging that is presented, and you're like, wow, this is so dark. Yeah, it doesn't mess with you. Yeah, in terms of visual gore. You know, when you hear of horror, you think of visual gore, people's head getting chopped off, people getting blown into pieces. No, this dives into what we usually fear, the darkness, you know, the element of the cross, you know, the element of fear in itself, the element of a place that has been totally been possessed by something. And as an outsider, when you come in, you start slowly learning about that. And once you discover that, you find that it's much more darker. Now I'm like Hellboy in that particular one. They discover that it's much more deeper than they thought it would be. So yeah, this is a very, very dark movie, and I liked the way they used the atmosphere because it feels real. Everything feels tangible. Everything feels like it was shot in a real place. It doesn't feel, you know, the way you watch modern movies and you just see the CGI. You see they feel artificial. They don't feel real. They don't feel like they were shot in a real place. This one feels like they actually went outside and actually shot, and it's a very contained movie because I think the premise is only like 3 places. There's a cabin, there's a church, and there is a mine area. So it feels, and there's a train, of course, but it feels much more contained. It doesn't feel large scale. Now, why did I give it a 3 instead of a 2.5? The budget is $20 million. $20 million to make a Hellboy movie, whereby it's supernatural that will demand a lot of makeup, which they did a great job with what they had. The makeup is also really good, especially with the Crooked Man. I like what they did with him and some of the things that he was able to do. But with the costume and what they were able to do with some of the effects, practically looks good. And yeah, so you feel that with that budget, they actually made a very decent production because it makes sense. There's a sense of direction, there's a flow of events. Characters have arcs. Characters have a sense of direction. It's not. Yes, you have the director. The director is Brian Taylor. He did Crank. If you remember, Crank is chaotic. The editing is chaotic. Some of the shots are everywhere. The camera is always shaking and moving. You get a bit of that here, especially with the action set pieces. There are a lot of quick cuts, which work for the horrific elements, but don't really work for the action set pieces and for everything else. Yes, you have that, but generally, there's a A and there's a Z. There's a beginning and there's an end, and there's a story within that. So that, with that budget, and you have a giant spider somewhere. As I said, you have a lot of makeup. You have a lot of very, very interesting shots with a lot of makeup that you feel that a lot of budget went into that. Plus now when you add in the costume and stuff, yeah, you can see where the budget actually went. Now I'm not saying the CGI is good because, yeah, as I say, it looks kind of cheap. I'm sorry to say, it just looks kind of cheap, and I thought the cinematographer would have done a better job because it's how would I put this? You see the way you have gray loot, what you call filters. You take a good picture and then you put in a gray filter and it desaturates the color and makes the picture look kind of cheap. Yeah, you get that look here. You get that gray feel, saturated feel of the picture that doesn't really feel well polished, and so it gives it a cheaper look. But then the story now elevates those scenes. Actually, that look works for some particular scenes, especially when you go into the second act. When you go into the cabin, when you go into the church, that's when that look actually works. But when you're on the outside and you're looking at wide shots of the forests of the cabin, that look doesn't really work in favor of the movie. But generally, the story was pretty awesome. I like what they were able to do with $20 million because you don't see small budget movies anymore. And the fact that they actually made a good story, that worked for me. Now, where do you get this? This is on Amazon and it's $19.99. It's basically $20. And in Kenya shillings, that's 2,600 shillings in Kenya. It's 2,590 something shillings, but then you add taxes, and because it's Kenya, you are taxed for everything. It goes to around 2,620 something. So yeah, it's basically the amount that you pay for a cinema. But what I think this production team made a mistake in, it should not be $20. I know it's a great movie, it looks good. As I said, I love the story, I love where they took the story, I love the horrific elements, but no, $20 is a lot. I would have wished to see this on streaming with my subscription, because when you think about it, $20 is my monthly subscription for Netflix or all the other whatever. So it doesn't make sense for it to be $20. Now, if they did not want to take it on streaming and you had to buy it on Amazon, I would have suggested they go for $12. $12 would have been decent for this type of movie, because it doesn't look like a $20 movie. I don't know if I'm making sense, because that's the same amount you'd pay to go see it in the cinemas. And it doesn't feel like the kind of movie that you watch in a cinema. So I would have wished they would have just kept either $15 to $12. That would have been more in line with what we have. We have a very good story. We have decent CGI. We have very good costume design. Even with Hellboy, it's decent, but it's not large scale and as impressive as you would expect a $20 movie. It is what it is. I've said it. Either that or they take that movie straight to streaming. So basically that's it. Would I recommend this? If you love horror, if you love psychological, spiritual horror, this works perfectly. If you're looking for a Hellboy movie like the previous 3 Hellboys, now this is not it. This is a far more smaller budget movie. But if you just want to be terrified, but if you're so religious and you're looking for something to get your adrenaline rushing because you're looking for something spiritually disturbing to watch, then this is perfect for you. So basically that's it. For the rest who just want something decent to watch, would I say not to buy this movie? No, I would suggest you buy it. Here's why. I think it's important for this movie to make it, in that we'll stop seeing big budget movies that just play safe with what they have to do and do not take risk with the story, do not take risk with the direction. They choose to go the same old way. So I wish for it to work. I wish for this movie to work. But then again, as a consumer, 2,600 bob. I mean, $20 for me. It's a lot of money. Those are like 2 movies in my country, in the theater. So I would have wished it would have been like $12. I think that would have worked very well. So it's up to you to make your decision. You can wait for it on streaming. Or if you feel that you need to support smaller movies, you can actually go on Amazon and get yourself a copy. You're actually going to buy. You're not going to be like, so going renting or stuff. You're actually going to buy a soft copy of the movie. So basically that's it. Remember to always watch what you enjoy and enjoy what you watch. I shall see you on the next one. Adios.